All right, and we're back for another edition of Plus Money Picks. Had another profitable card last weekend with Ige and Zombie. Only a few units of profit, but glad to be coming out of the weekend with a profit. This upcoming weekend, it's a tough one betting wise. Uh, Not a lot of fights to feel completely comfortable in. Um, but we're going to do our best with our bets, and let's get started with Yancy Medeiros and Damir Hadzovic. So this fight will be an interesting fight to start off the Volkov and Gane card. Damir Hadzovic 13 and 6 is 13 and 6, and Yancy Medeiros is 15 and 7. Currently, Yancy Medeiros is an underdog. He is plus 120, and Hadzovic is minus 140. I actually placed a straight bet on Yancy Medeiros when he was plus 130. So just getting into what each of these fighters are like. Hadzovic, he's not that great on the feet, which I think he's going to really want it to be on the feet. His striking defense on paper is better than Hadzovic, but at the same time, his significant strikes landed per minute is the same as what he absorbs per minute. So I think it'll still be fairly back and forth on the feet. Looking at Hadzovic, he does gas quickly. We saw that against Christos Giagos. And he was Alan Patrick's last win. He got taken down 9 times in that fight. He also had to pull out of this same matchup the last time because of health issues, which when I was looking online, I couldn't see exactly what those health issues were. And honestly, he kind of comes off as a little bit of an idiot. He was calling for a rematch after getting submitted by Moykano in just seconds. So not particularly a fan of Hadzovic. Looking at Medeiros is going to have a 5-inch reach advantage. Looking at Medeiros' striking defense stats, they're not good really at all. His strikes absorbed per minute is more than his strikes landed per minute, but he also is higher volume than Hadzovic, so at least he has that advantage. Medeiros has a better takedown defense than Hadzovic. Hadzovic actually only has a 39% takedown defense, while Medeiros has a 76% takedown defense. And really where we saw him have issues with defending takedowns was against Gregor Gillespie, but there's no shame in that. The one thing that makes me worried about Medeiros in this fight is he has been knocked out 4 times, but when you look into it, one was a doctor stoppage, and the other 3 were pretty high-level competition. So, yeah, looking at the stats of these guys, how their last fights have gone, this does really look like a dog or pass situation, which led me to choose Medeiros in this one, and I'm guessing he'll take this by decision. Next, we have Charles Rosa and Justin James. Justin James, really someone that burst onto the scene, knocking out Frank Camacho in the first round, but since then hasn't looked good at all. Has gotten finished in his last 3 fights. Charles Rosa, kind of just alternating wins and losses recently, but not looking too terrible. The Derek Minner one was a tough fight for him, but I think he showed a lot of heart in the Kevin Aguilar fight, which makes me feel decently good about him matching up with Justin James. Justin James is 16 and 7, Charles Rosa 13 and 5. And when we're looking at the odds, Charles Rosa, he stayed at minus 175 for a while, and Justin James is coming back at plus 150. When I was looking into these guys, so like I said, Justin James, 3 straight losses by finish. One was a doctor stoppage. He's one of these guys too where just striking stat wise does not look too good. His significant strikes landed per minute is 3.58 versus 6.49 strikes absorbed per minute in the UFC. And all of his finish losses have came in the UFC, so he's just, once he's reached that UFC competition, has just not fared very well. Doesn't have great cardio, kind of just wings hooks, just looks for a finish early on. And then when he gets to the ground, he's shown that he can get controlled on the ground, which is not something you want to be showing when you're facing a guy like Charles Rosa. Charles Rosa also absorbs more significant strikes per minute than he lands, but it's a pretty small margin. He absorbs 3.78 per minute and lands 3.11 per minute, which I think kind of goes with his style. I think he does have a decent boxing background, but ultimately he wants the fight to end up on the ground. So he's a little bit reckless every once in a while. That's why his striking defense percentage is only 48%. It's also why his takedown defense percentage is low. It's 40%. And in one of the fights I was watching, the commentators mentioned that Rosa even said that he kind of accepts takedowns, or at least he used to accept takedowns just to get to the ground and try to work submissions. Rosa's only finished loss came to Shane Burgos. I don't think there's a whole lot of shame in that. And like I said, he does have a boxing background. He has pretty decent boxing and did well against Aguilar, even with having a 4-inch reach disadvantage in that fight. Rosa's also going to have a bit better of a kick game than James. James hasn't really shown many kicks in his UFC fight so far. And then once this fight goes to the ground, if it ever does, I would give Rosa a huge advantage there. So I decided to go with Rosa in this one. I actually have him in a parlay. I would guess he takes this fight by decision, but if James really starts gassing out hard, then I think Charles Rosa submission is definitely on the table. Next up is Julia Avila versus Julia Stoliarenko. This was a fight that was supposed to happen before, I believe. Julia Stoliarenko 9-4-1, while Julia Avila is 8-2. Julia Avila, seems like the odds are just swinging harder and harder in her favor. Currently, I believe she is minus 360, and let's see what Stoliarenko is coming back at. Yeah, Julia Avila minus 360 and Julia Stoliarenko is plus 285. I think that number is pretty wild, especially because Avila has already shown she's not quite the highest level in the UFC. So looking into what both of these fighters bring to the table, Stoliarenko, she does have 2 knockout losses, but they were earlier in her career. The one thing that I don't like is that one of those was to Pudilova, who didn't fare very well in the UFC. In Stoliarenko's lone UFC fight, she couldn't get off the cage against Yana Kunitskaya. She tried to pull guard a lot to get to the armbar, which is where she gets most of her wins. She has 8 of her 9 wins by armbar, I believe. When it comes to striking, she kind of just wings her shots and doesn't defend very well. And then the last time that she was supposed to fight in the UFC, she had the whole weight issue where she passed out multiple times on the scale. So Avila, she'll definitely be the better striker in this one. She herself has only been finished once. She has good wins over Nico Montano, Marion Renault, and Penny Kianzad, which Stoliarenko actually already has a loss to Kianzad. Avila will have a slightly better reach. And yeah, the only thing is she hasn't really faced that great of a submission threat. I know she's faced Sijara Eubanks, and Eubanks came close to submitting her. But Eubanks doesn't have any submission wins in the UFC. And she did lose that fight to Eubanks when she got grappled heavily. So I don't think I really want to bet Avila with this high line. I think in this one, if you were just trying to make a lot off of a small bet, not have a lot of risk, then you might even look at a prop with Stoliarenko by sub. And then, yeah, if you were trying to just maybe get a little bit more specific, I think Avila probably wins this fight by decision, just because even though Stoliarenko has a couple knockout losses, she is pretty durable. So I don't think that this is the best fight to bet on, at least straight, just because the odds have gotten kind of crazy. But I do think that Avila should win this fight. Our next fight is one that I think will most likely end inside the distance. We have Marcin Prachnio and Ike Villanueva. Marcin Prachnio 14-5, and Ike Villanueva 18 and 11. Both of these guys are kind of finish or get finished kind of fighters. Pacquiao has been knocked out 4 times, and Villanueva has been knocked out 5 times. Pacquiao's knockout losses have came to a higher level of competition than Villanueva's. And Pacquiao, he lands more significant strikes than he absorbs, actually. It's just that he's gotten cracked in his UFC fights and gotten dropped. So Pacquiao actually does have a 58% striking defense. But then you look at Villanueva, and he's got a 37% striking defense in the UFC. Um, and he fights kind of short. He's not quite as technical as Pacquiao. Pacquiao actually has some pretty clean striking, and Villanueva is more just trying to land hooks on you and get you out of there. Villanueva did look a lot better in his last fight, but I just didn't see enough in that to make me confident that Villanueva could edge out Pacquiao, and I think Pacquiao is more than capable of cracking Villanueva. So I did end up sprinkling Pacquiao in some parlays, which I do feel real nervous about. I kind of put him in some of my more low confidence parlays, but then I also bet that Pacquiao would win inside the distance, which was a nice little plus money play. So yeah, I think this one is probably not going the distance. And with that being said, I think it's Pacquiao that comes out of this victorious. The next fight we have is was put together on short notice. We have Warlley Alves, and then we have Jeremiah Wells making his UFC debut. Alves 14-4, and Jeremiah Wells is 8-2-1. Even though this is Wells' debut, he's actually going to be the older fighter in this one by about 4 years. Warlley Alves, surprisingly, he's only 30 years old. I kind of always thought of him as more of a vet, so I assumed that he was a bit older. But yeah, Jeremiah Wells is actually going to be the older guy in this fight. Looking at how they match up, Alves will have a 2-inch height advantage, but Wells is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Looking into Wells, there's not a lot of tape that I could access on the guy, but he does have 6 finishes, 3 by sub and 3 by knockout. And he's a powerful guy. He's pretty shredded, and his knockouts are clean knockouts where the guys are just out. And he hasn't been finished as a pro, at least. But it's just kind of hard to tell what you have with Wells, just because there's not a lot of good fight tape out on him. And obviously, with him not being in the UFC yet, he hasn't really faced all that high level of competition. Whereas Alves, I mean, he's a UFC vet. He has wins over high level guys like Colby Covington. His finish losses are kind of strange, though. I mean, he got submitted by Randy Brown, although that was a fight that he was doing pretty well. And then having a KO loss to Kraus doesn't make me feel all that confident when you're facing a young up-and-comer with a lot of power like Jeremiah Wells. Alves doesn't have that great of striking defense, but he has good takedown defense and takedown accuracy. So I don't know. I mean, Alves, he hits very hard as well. So with all that being said, both these guys are finishers, typically like to get fights done in the early rounds. So I would say the safe bet is probably take a fight doesn't go the distance. In this one, I just decided to do, I believe I bet that the fight was going to be under 1.5 rounds, just because it's hard to take a side without knowing Wells very well. Our next fight is going to be Shavkat Rockmanoff and Michel Proseris. Rockmanoff looked pretty good in his UFC debut against Oliveira. And Proseris in his last fight took a loss to Ismail Nurdiev. Not the best look, especially for a guy that's pushing 40 and was on a pretty good roll before that. As far as how they match up, Proseris is only 5'6", while Shavkat Rockmanoff is 6'1". On Tapology, it shows that Proseris has a 67-inch reach, while Shavkat Rockmanoff has a 77-inch reach, so almost a whole foot difference in reach. Not very good. And then age-wise, Rockmanoff's only 26 years old, whereas Proseris, like I said, he's pushing 40. Proseris, he does have 11 wins by sub on his record, but only 3 are in the UFC, and he's had 13 UFC fights. That being said, he is 10-3 in the UFC, but his losses are kind of weird. Not exactly. I mean, he has a loss to Kevin Lee, but his other losses I think are just not to all that impressive guys. Not a lot of his wins really stand out all that much. He does have a win over Gilbert Burns, which is impressive. But 67 significant strikes is the highest he's ever gotten in his UFC career. He's just not very high volume. Whereas Rockmanoff, he's a really well-rounded guy. And I think if he stays away from the grappling a bit, then he'll be fine. And he won't really be a fish out of water if it does get to grappling. I wouldn't be surprised to see Rockmanoff get takedowns in this one. If you're looking at the line, Rockmanoff right now, he's minus 300. He's just kind of been steadily climbing throughout the week. And Michel Proseris is plus 240. And anything could happen in the UFC, so I don't think Proseris has no chance. I don't know how I feel about the line drifting that hard, but I do think that Rockmanoff should handle this fight just fine. But just because of the grapple approach from Proseris, I think he could kind of waste a lot of time with that. So I'm kind of leaning towards taking Rockmanoff by decision. Our next fight is kind of a sketchy one from a betting perspective. We have Danilo Marquez and Kennedy Nzechukwu. Both these guys were victorious in their last couple fights. So I have Nzechukwu, he is minus 125 on Bet Online, and Danilo Marquez is plus 105, which varies from what Tipology says, but all the odds that I'm using are going to be through Bet Online. So we'll start with Danilo Marquez. He is low volume striking wise, but he has got 4 takedowns in both of his UFC fights so far. But those were against pretty low level grapplers. Basically, all he does is he'll reach in for the single leg, and it really is a reachy shot. And then he kind of just tries to pull people away or trip them while he has the single leg. I think he's definitely going to do that versus Kennedy. Marquez, he's dangerous with submissions, and Kennedy's only loss is by submission. But Kennedy, he's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage in this one. Their height isn't really very different, but Danilo Marquez, he's more around 77 inches of reach, whereas Kennedy has an 83-inch reach. And I think that could definitely play a factor. When I was watching Kennedy's fights, he is pretty effective at defending takedowns, and I actually saw him defend similar singles as to what Marquez uses. And when he goes down to the ground, he's not afraid to ground and pound his opponents. And he's decent at getting up from the ground too. I think he shouldn't really play around with Danilo Marquez on the ground too much. So yeah, I think he should just focus on immediately getting up, getting the standing. And once it's standing, he's going to have better volume and cleaner striking. So I'm going to take Kennedy and Nzechukwu in this one. And if I had to choose an outcome, I would say he most likely wins this by decision. Our next fight is a lightweight fight between Renato Moykano and Jai Herbert. Currently on Bet Online, Moykano is minus 235 and Herbert is coming back at plus 200. Looking at Moykano's recent fights, he has lost 3 of his last 4 by knockout. However, 2 of those were to both the Korean Zombie and Jose Aldo, and both of those knockout losses were at featherweight. Moykano has since come up to lightweight, but then he actually got knocked out by Fiziev at lightweight, although there's not a whole lot of shame in that either because Fiziev is a very clean striker. It's just that I think it looks bad because Moykano just clearly stayed on the feet too long with them when his advantage was on the ground. Jai Herbert had his UFC debut against Francisco Trinaldo, was looking good in that fight until he got knocked out. But before that was doing really well in Cage Warriors. Herbert, he will have a 5-inch reach advantage in this one, which I do like. Moykano, I can understand why he's the favorite. He has really good volume and good stats. Um, but Herbert, I mean, he's got that reach advantage. He does have power and he has an okay ground game. I think Moykano does have the advantage there too, but Herbert can probably defend himself. It's just that Herbert's got 9 of his 10 wins are by finish, and 8 of those are by knockout. And with Moykano losing 3 of his last 4 by knockout, I think it's warranted to take Herbert as an underdog play, especially with him being at plus 200. So I decided to straight bet him at plus 200. And I think as far as a prop play, maybe take Herbert by knockout on this one. But I'm sticking with just the straight pick with plus 200. Our next fight is one that I think has the potential to play out pretty closely. It's Nicholas Dalby and Tim Means. Nicholas Dalby 19-3-1, and Tim Means is 31-12-1. Currently, Tim Means, I believe he is minus 135 on Bet Online, and Nicholas Dalby is plus 115. Looking at Tim Means, he is 19-2 by knockout, but 5-5 by sub. If you're looking at Dalby's record, he is 4-0 by sub, but all of those sub wins are outside of the UFC. Dalby actually has no finishes himself in the UFC, and Dalby's only finished loss was overturned. But if you're looking at his 7 UFC fights, he's been knocked down in 4 of his 7 UFC fights. Tim Means he's going to be higher volume in this one. Tim Means lands 5.16 significant strikes per minute, whereas he absorbs 3.58. I think he has a higher likelihood of getting a clean takedown in this one and getting a finish. Even though if you're looking at Dalby's takedown stats, it's kind of weird because he has a fight or two where he got a lot of takedowns, but he's really not that good with takedowns. The thing that's sketchy about betting against Nicholas Dalby is he has a lot of close fights and he has some wins with good strikers, but I think it's just because of his movement and how many strikes he throws out there that don't land. When you're looking at his striking stats, he has a 37% striking accuracy, which isn't surprising if you look at a fight like his fight with Daniel Rodriguez. He's kind of just always spamming things out there, but they're not really doing anything. So I do worry about this going to decision because I think bad judges might give it to Dalby, but I'm going to say that Tim Means takes this one by decision, and I decided to do a straight bet on Tim Means when he dipped a little bit below minus 130. Our next fight is going to be another interesting one at featherweight between Andre Fili and Daniel Pineda. Andre Fili, he's become a pretty decent favorite in this one. He's minus 225, and Daniel Pineda is coming back at plus 190. Not sure if I really agree with it being lined that way, but I do see that Fili should be the favorite in this one. Fili, he's only 30 years old, or actually he'll be 31 by the time this fight happens, whereas Daniel Pineda, he's 35, pushing 36. Daniel Pineda did not look good in his last fight. He just couldn't finish takedowns against Cub Swanson, even when he was deep in on takedowns. He ended up just getting finished in that one. Daniel Pineda, he's been knocked out 3 times and submitted 6 times. He tends to get finished when he loses. He has a 44% striking defense and a 44% takedown defense against UFC competition. But he does have good scrambling on the ground. He can get taken down easily, but once he's on the ground, he can fend for himself all right. His leg kicks looks pretty good against Swanson. I think he does have some power. But I think people kind of gave a little bit too much to him for the Burns fight. Burns just got rocked and gassed immediately, and he wasn't even trying to do any damage once it went to the ground. He kind of just wanted to lay on Pineda, which showed me that he just didn't have it in him in that fight. So I think that fight really made Pineda look good when it shouldn't have. Fili, he's going to have a 4-inch reach advantage in this one. Fili's been knocked out twice and sub twice, so he's been finished before too, but Fili's just way more well-rounded. He didn't take as much damage as Pineda did in his last fight because it was more of a grappling match with Bryce Mitchell. He has a decent takedown defense, and he actually did okay with Mitchell with takedown defense, but Mitchell just kept going, so he ended up getting 7 takedowns on him. I think Feely, he could use his long jab and some of his kicks to maintain distance and kind of just tire out Pineda in this fight. I think he'll have the better cardio to just outlast Daniel Pineda. And I think with his kind of scrambling, he should be able to avoid subs from Pineda. So while I'm not a fan of where the line is at, I think Feely should win this one. And since Feely's not the most potent finisher, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes it by decision. But I didn't decide to get too picky with that and kind of just started parlaying Feely. Although I don't feel super confident with him in this matchup, I do think he should win this fight. Our next fight is a very intriguing matchup at bantamweight between Raoni Barcelos and Timur Valiev. Timur Valiev is 17-2, while Raoni Barcelos is 16-1. I hadn't really paid a whole lot of attention to Barcelos until analyzing this fight, and I've got to say I was really impressed with what I saw. Valiev, he's one of these Russian guys that, good takedown game, decent volume on the feet, pretty well rounded. But he has shown difficulty with high paced fights. He gassed with the Trevin Jones fight. Kind of an outlier in his career, but still not the best look within the UFC. But even though he has a good takedown game, I wouldn't say he has the most intimidating ground and pound, which in this kind of matchup, if that's what he was going to want to use, I would want to see more powerful striking on the ground from Valiev. Because Barcelos is pretty difficult to control on the ground, so I don't see Valiev having too much control time, even if he gets him down. Looking at Barcelos, all of his stats, they're pretty solid in the UFC. He has good leg kicks, good movement. I don't think he'll have the power that Jones has to be able to knock out Timur Valiev. But so far from what I've seen, he'll probably have the cardio advantage. I think Barcelos really has a lot of advantages in this fight. Size-wise, it's not like he's going to have a reach advantage or anything, but I just think he has a lot of tools, which is why he's became a pretty sizable favorite in this one. Currently, he is minus 220 and Valiev is plus 185, but I could see it. Raoni Barcelos looks like a very promising prospect. With where the line's at, I ended up just deciding to put Barcelos in some parlays, but someone that I'm looking forward to watching fight this weekend, and I feel pretty confident in Raoni Barcelos. So our co-main event for Volkov versus Gane is going to be Ovince St. Preux versus Tanner Boser. Not too excited to see OSP at heavyweight again, to be honest. He just didn't look very good against Ben Rothwell when he went up to heavyweight. In this one, Tanner Boser, I think he's going to have the volume advantage in this one. He's landed 4.21 significant strikes per minute while only absorbing 2.26. He has fought some low volume and low level guys, so maybe some of those stats are kind of swayed because of that. But at the same time, he fought Gane. It's just that in that one, he was outstruck by quite a bit. Boser, he's a lot lighter on his feet while he's fighting. He bounces around, uses a lot of movement. He possibly has, I really do think he'll have better cardio at heavyweight than OSP. Although OSP is kind of one of those guys that saves energy by just not doing too much and picking his opportunities to expend energy. I think Boser in this one should just throw leg kicks to mess with St. Preux's push kick, slow down any movement that he has. I think that would just amplify Boser's movement advantage. St. Preux in this one, even though he's coming up to heavyweight, he's actually going to have a sizable reach advantage. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage over Boser. But like I said, lower volume. He lands 2.68 significant strikes per minute while absorbing 3.03. Looking at his fight against Rothwell at heavyweight, he kind of ran from him a lot of the time. And then when I was looking at other fights of his recently, he spends a lot of time just waiting and then throwing single kicks or single shots, which I just don't think is the best way to steal rounds, especially at heavyweight. I don't think he'll be able to pop Boser that much. At least it's not enough to outweigh Boser's volume. And I mean, I guess St. Preux could mix in some takedowns, but I don't see it being all that effective in this one. So I think Boser takes a decision in this one. And it's kind of weird because I just don't even really get why OSP took this fight. But yeah, I'll take Boser in this one. I think I put him in a parlay or two because currently he's minus 175. Not a lot of return in just betting him straight at this point. So now we're at our main event between Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov. Alexander Volkov currently plus 145 and Cyril Gane is minus 170. Looking at how they match up, Cyril Gane is, I believe he is 6'4", and then Volkov is listed at 6'7". Cyril Gane actually has a slight reach advantage in this one, which I didn't expect. I thought with Volkov's height advantage, he would also have a reach advantage. But with that height advantage, I would expect that Volkov's going to have a little bit of a leg reach advantage. So we'll see if he tries to maintain distance with his kicks. Gane so far in the UFC, a guy that's got very good movement, super quick with punches and kicks, just really good at avoiding damage. He does have a 69% striking defense, and when you're looking at significant strikes, he lands 5.04 per minute while only absorbing 1.85. He could also mix in takedowns pretty well. He's good at timing them. He's already got 5-round experience, going 5 rounds with Rosenstruck. But the thing about that fight is it's not all that impressive as a 5-round fight because Rosenstruck didn't really throw that much. He didn't really do much to tire out Cyril Gane. Volkov is someone that also has plenty of experience with 5-round fights. And yeah, he's also a high volume guy. He lands 4.88 significant strikes per minute while only absorbing 2.48. And I mean, he has pretty good striking defense as well. He's pushing 60% in his striking defense. So I think this one, it should be the toughest test for Cyril Gane so far. And we'll see how he does. I think if Cyril Gane does win this fight, then he's someone that is always going to have very highly lined fights. He's going to be coming in more like minus 300 on guys. But yeah, Volkov, he's got a lot of things in his favor in this one, being one of the tallest guys that Cyril Gane's fought so far. Got probably the most fights under his belt out of anyone he's faced so far, and is in a really good run on his career right now. They're looking at the last 2 fights for Volkov, 2 knockouts, albeit guys that tend to get knocked out. But yeah, I think Volkov, very worthy underdog in this one, which is why I decided to bet him straight. And I think Volkov, if he does win, he probably just edges this out by decision. Cyril Gane looks really dangerous, but I think he's going to end up being more of a decision fighter in the UFC. And I think Volkov will be willing to kind of just trade strikes back and forth. So I see this going all 5. And yeah, would not be surprised to see Volkov on the winning side of this one. So that is all for my picks and predictions for the entire card of Gane versus Volkov. This is one where I would not be surprised if this is the end of the winning streak that I'm on. There's some fights that are hard to get a read on and some favorites that I would not be surprised if they fall in this one. So once again, just be careful with any bets you place this weekend. Really do your research. Try to find any stats or tools that you can to give you an advantage in this one. And like always, good luck to everyone out there. Please be sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed what you've been watching. All right, have a good one.